on the actual passages that we went over today, the Mubayyin and the Mujmal? Is there a question on those? Or maybe something needs clarification? Yes, sister?
Talking about the Mujmal, like you said, we need some cross-reference. Isn't it that sometimes the verse coming before it or the verse which is following it explains what the meaning is?
Absolutely, that's cross-referencing. Absolutely, that's cross-referencing. So sometimes a passage will appear, and you'll say, well, wait a minute, where did this come from? And if you put it back in its context, because cross-referencing is about context as well, and you read it, you'll find this doesn't mean at all what they attempted to explain to me. But sometimes a passage isn't like that. Sometimes a word appears in one passage. And you look at it and you think, well, what does that mean? And then you've got to go and you have to search for that word, and eventually you find out the points of what it means. So yes, many times you will find by cross-referencing, it'll be a few pages before, or a few passages before, a few after. But other times, you may have to really do intensive study of cross-referencing to know your Quran properly. Because this is one of the main issues that sometimes Orthodox Muslims get bombarded with, is by not being able to effectively cross-reference. We may read the Quran, we may be really good, but sometimes not cross-referencing is where we get hurt, because a lot of these groups and cults and all these other things, they really master these little tidbits of Quran that they memorize, and they know them so easy. They know them so easy. Like the guy that I met that was married to 9 wives, when he quoted that passage to me, married 2, 3, or 4, he quoted the Arabic and the English, where it was, the surah, the number. He said, well, there it is. It's right after that ayah. I told you, brother. Because he had completely just mastered that little thing. Right? Mastered it. Right? And likewise, the other people that think that, people, if they think that there's another prophet after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they master certain passages in the Quran and say, well, see, here it is. And sometimes the innocent Orthodox Muslim is just caught unaware. Oh yeah, wow. And he's caught off guard. Like for example, someone came to my mother-in-law and argued with her about a point and said, well, you can't say the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, you can't say he's a prophet, he's only a messenger. You can't say he's a prophet. And he brought like 3 passages. and he quoted them, the Arabic and the English. And he was really, it sounded convincing. And I said, what did he say? He said, yeah, you can't call him a prophet. I said, you show him Surah Al-Ahzab ayah 40. But he is the messenger of Allah and the seal of the prophets. You show him Surah Al-A'raf 7 pages in, that you follow the prophet, unlettered, the messenger. There you are. And it happens another 2 ayahs later. So just knowing how to cross-reference those points, it saves you from a lot of the doubts that are thrown your way. Is there a question on either? And the questions I could also take could be on the 2 lectures before as well. Yes?
What's the difference then between muhkamat and mubayyin?
Muhkamat, 9 times out of 10 are going to be dealing with factors that are governed on halal and haram. It's going to be that. Where mubayyin ayat will be dealing with matters that will have to do mostly with commands. So it might not be halal and haram, it will most likely be a command. But sometimes a muhkam ayah is also called mubayyin, because sometimes they have both in them. Or here's another example. I'll give you a beautiful example. Sometimes mujmal, you may not know this, some of you may. Did you know that sometimes mujmal and mubayyin ayat appear in the same surah, right next to each other? Shall I give you an example? Al-Qari'ah, Mal-Qari'ah, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا-الْقَارِعَةُ يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسُ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ. So the first 3 passages are mujmal, because they're telling us, well, what is the Qari'ah? It asks us 3 times. And then it gives us what it is. That's mubayyin. So firstly, we don't even have to cross-reference in that surah. It gives us the first one, Al-Qari'ah, Mal-Qari'ah, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا-الْقَارِعَةُ. Okay, that's mujmal. I don't know what is Al-Qari'ah. يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسُ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ. The day when people will be like scattered moths. So now you've got the mubayyin passage after. And the rest of it goes the same way. So whenever you see that, like for example, Al-Haqqa, Mal-Haqqa, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا-الْحَاقَّةُ, the passage that's going to come after that is going to tell you what Al-Haqqa is. So whenever you see a surah doing that, that's mujmal. And what comes after is going to tell you, it's going to clarify by cross-referencing. So sometimes, again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed it in a way that cross-references itself in the very same surah. So it really is amazing.
What about at the beginning of some certain surahs, like Surah Al-Nazi'at and Surah Al-Adiyat, but there seems to exist a difference of opinion as to what they exactly are? Is that because they're mujmal? That is
because they do have some mujmalat in them.
Yes. Mursalat as well.
Yes, Mursalat has some mujmal in it. Is there a question on perhaps another thing? It could be on maybe the two classes we did before, because maybe someone had a lingering question in their mind about something before, or a comment about before. I wanted to ask you as well, is the material clear and lucid and simple to understand? Or do you find yourself struggling with it a lot? You find yourself struggling with it a lot? What do you find yourself struggling with, mainly? Are the words not clear, or the passages maybe?
Maybe it's just the information overload sometimes.
Information overload? Okay, all right.
You silence the crowd.
Or maybe, or is it presentation? Is there anything wrong in the presentation? Is the presentation not easy to follow? Or are there maybe not enough proofs or verses for particular areas? Or are there enough verses and proofs and quotes?
I think it's explaining Arabic words more as well.
Explaining Arabic words more? Okay, so maybe I should have more quotes from the scholars. Give it a glossary. Should I have maybe a glossary? All right, because I tried to define them, but maybe I don't. Should I incorporate a small glossary, or maybe a type of coding? Yes.
I think it'd be helpful if you could make simple notes, clear, concise ones on the board when you're doing something, when you're relating to the Quran. So you could look at the forms and how something's written to in Arabic when you translate it, what the meaning is, and different ways it's written, because it's a phonetical language. We're not all fluent in Arabic.
Well, what I tend to do is most of the lecture is taken from these, and then after the lecture I give you the handout, and the handout has 98% of the information. The parts that need some explanation, where I see maybe something needs clarification, I tend to clarify that in the lecture itself. But all of the actual proofs, evidences from the scholars, and reasoning occurs in those sheets.
Can we have the notes first, so we can actually
the notes first.
And we can start making notes on the side.
You could make notes. You could make notes on the side, yeah, because some people find that easier, but some people find it distracting as well. So I think it's up. I'll pass them out, and it's up to you whether you want to follow along using them or to just hold them to yourselves and wait until you get home to look at them. That's about the thing. What is there any other thing that maybe could help improve the thing?
Oh, sorry, that is not about improvement.
No, about improvement. What was it?
It was two questions.
Yes.
Just backtracking. I'm quite confused on what you said about the position of having the position on
yes.
feet.
Yeah, it has to do with a position that exists in the madhab about the soles of the feet. About the soles of the feet. Because normally there's a hadith that indicates that it makes an indication that when one of the sahabiyat would pray, she would pray, and the actual back of her dress would go down and cover her feet. Now that is taken, that and some 3 other hadith are taken by some Hanafi ulama to mean that the soles of the feet are not to be revealed in the salah. So your dress should be long enough to when you go down, if your feet are bare. If your feet are bare, when you go down, that they're actually covered to avoid exposing them. Otherwise, wear socks so that they're not bare.
That's the final ruling.
No, that's not the final ruling. That's a riwayah. That's a position. Where the other position of the subcontinent, Jordanian, and other Hanafis is no. It's the point of the soles of the feet is not a factor, right? So that's another position. Now the final ruling is it's not a factor. That's the final ruling, because there's these two. There's a zahir. We want to know, okay, what is the nas? Well, the nas is it's not an issue. So if you go there, you tell them, I respect your opinion and everything, and maybe to avoid fitna, just pray with socks. Just pray with socks.
And just one more.
Yeah.
How that mundane passage that you gave about fornicators only marrying fornicators, how is that interpreted then?
Well, the particular passage is that it says the fornicator may not marry any except a fornicatress. Now, this is referring to because a Sahabi had seen a prostitute in Jahiliyyah, and he had been with that woman in Jahiliyyah. Now he became a Muslim, and he had also seen that she had also become a Muslim, and she hadn't become a Muslim, but he wanted to marry her and bring her to Islam. And these ayat were revealed regarding that because, firstly, she was still fornicating and doing some of those acts, and also the fact that if someone is known to have been promiscuous outwardly in an issue like prostitution or something like this, that you are not to marry that person to, for example, a virgin, someone that is virtuous. You're not to do that if it's outward. Now, if someone had been in Jahiliyyah and they had done these things, but they weren't known, where they made it famous, a show, where they were flaunting it, then no, they wouldn't fall under this ayah. Because this happens to many brothers and sisters that come into the deen. Some people read this passage and say, well, when you were in Jahiliyyah, maybe you did these things, so I can't be married to you anymore. That's not what the passage means. The passage is talking about people that had been outlandish, that had actually flaunted and everything else, that they're not to be married. And this ruling is not a ruling that's always impermissible, but it's a ruling that for virtuous people marrying unvirtuous people, that it is best left alone, because otherwise people's status can be removed or they can lose rank.
Well, you know, when you're talking about Jahiliyyah, I mean, what about Muslims who were born Muslims and this happened? Because unfortunately, this is
this sometimes does happen.
America and in United Kingdom.
Yes, this does happen.
So even the Jahiliyyah.
And again, that again would be governed by the principles that were spoken of at the beginning. If they had done it and then they had repented, then that's fine. But if they had actually they'd actually revealed it, because there's a difference between doing it and then doing it and revealing it. Like, for example, flaunting and bragging it. For example, they were in magazines and bragging all over the place and things like this. This is a different matter. Yes, if they were known for that, they made a profession of that. That's different.
Just out of curiosity, what is the punishment for fornication in Islam?
Well, there's two things, because the word zina carries two meanings. One is adultery, one's fornication. Adultery is when you're actually married and you do that, which is the death penalty. This is imposed by a state or a state authority. And then there's fornication, which is where you receive lashes for doing that. Now again, that is implemented by a state authority. There have been brothers in Birmingham, I love them, but they've done this to brothers and other sisters that they found out that have done this to try to teach them a lesson, and they've implemented these things on them. That's not good, because that's very dangerous. Because if you get caught, people will go to the police and say, yeah, I've been flogged. And you can't tell the judge, well, Allah said in His revelation. No, that's not for us to do. Implementation, hudud, judicial rulings, are carried out by a khalifa, his representative, or a sentencing qadi. Now, as far as I know, no one in this room is a sentencing qadi, a khalifa, or their representative. So it's not for our affair to do. So, but we should be aware of the punishment. And even though we can't be punished, we should fear Allah in the hereafter, because if they don't catch us, indeed, we will appear before Him. Indeed. Is there any other thing that needs? Yes?
Can I ask a general question?
General. Yes.
Just because recently there's been a big kickback about certain groups, I won't mention the names, but certain groups in Britain who are making it hell for other Muslims living in Britain by saying certain statements. Yes. What would be the Islamic ruling on that? I mean, how would the orthodoxy deal with that when you don't actually have ulama in place who actually, there's no had on them, there's no, what do you do?
Some have taken the constructive position where they've actually shunned them from the community, because they found that that's been effective by actually shunning people that do these actions, by shunning them from their community and their masjids, and people boycotting them socially and economically and in other ways. They found that that's worked effectively. That seems to be, in this circumstance, the best thing that we can really do, is to boycott them in terms of companionship, economically, and business-wise. We don't take on business transactions with them.
I happened to be in Luton a couple of days ago, and the fear is, from what I was hearing there, because some of these recent arrests were in Luton, and there's been payback from the non-Muslims to the Muslims, where sisters have had their hijab pulled off and taunts and all sorts. Where in the past, when the ruling body in Masajid have been asked about that, they've said, okay, there are Muslim brothers, nobody's to lay a hand on them. But now,